Moscow, December 1924, the first night of Hanukkah. While Jewish families across Russia lit their menorahs in secret, two titans prepared for a battle that would reshape the world forever. Lenin was dead. The revolution hung in the balance. And in the shadows of the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky circled each other like wolves, each believing they alone could save Russia's soul. But this isn't just another history lesson. This is the story of how 8 nights of Hanukkah became 8 rounds in the greatest political deathmatch of the 20th century. Picture this. Trotsky, the brilliant orator with fire in his eyes, pacing his study as snow fell on Red Square. In his hand, a letter from his Jewish grandmother, smuggled from Ukraine. Lev, she wrote, using his birth name, remember the Maccabees. Sometimes the few must fight the many to keep the light alive. Meanwhile, across the city, Stalin sat in his modest apartment, methodically planning his next move. The Georgian peasant's son had learned that power wasn't won through speeches. It was seized in darkness, one ally at a time. The irony wasn't lost on either man. Trotsky, born Lev Bronstein to a Jewish farming family, had rejected his heritage for the revolution. Yet here he was, lighting a small menorah his wife had hidden away. Stalin, born Yosef Yukhashvili, had abandoned the Orthodox seminary for Marx and Lenin, but he understood the power of faith and how to destroy it. As the first candle flickered in Trotsky's window, he remembered his father's words about the oil that should have lasted 1 day, but burned for 8. Perhaps, Trotsky whispered to his reflection, revolutions need their own miracles. The next morning, December 19th, the Central Committee gathered. Stalin had spent weeks courting every member, promising positions, threatening careers. Trotsky arrived late, still believing his reputation as Lenin's right hand would carry the day. He was wrong. Stalin's first move was masterful. He read aloud Lenin's testament, the document that warned against Stalin's accumulation of power. But he framed it perfectly. Comrade Lenin feared I was too rude, Stalin said with false humility. Perhaps revolution requires gentler hands than mine. The room erupted in supportive protests. Stalin had turned his greatest weakness into strength, making himself appear modest while positioning Trotsky as the arrogant intellectual. That night, the second Hanukkah candle burned as Trotsky realized the trap closing around him. His allies were vanishing. Kamenev and Zinoviev, once his supporters, now sided with Stalin out of fear of Trotsky's radicalism. The man who had organized the October Revolution was being outmaneuvered by a patient bureaucrat. But Trotsky wasn't finished. On the third night of Hanukkah, he made his boldest move yet. Standing before the party congress, he delivered what many consider the greatest speech of his career. "We stand at a crossroads," Trotsky declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "Down one path lies permanent revolution, spreading our flame across the world. Down the other lies socialism in one country, a fortress that will eventually crumble from within." The audience was mesmerized. This was the Trotsky who had rallied the Red Army to victory, the man who could make grown revolutionaries weep with his words. Stalin sat motionless, his yellow eyes calculating. He knew that passion could move crowds, but fear moved individuals. After Trotsky's speech, Stalin worked through the night. By morning, 3 key Trotsky supporters had been offered positions in distant provinces. They all accepted. The fourth night brought news that chilled Trotsky's blood. His closest ally, Antonov Ovchinko, had been arrested on charges of counter-revolutionary activity. The charges were false, but in Stalin's world, truth was less important than control. Trotsky's wife, Natalia, found him standing at their window, watching the Hanukkah candles of a neighboring Jewish family. "They burn their lights in defiance," she said softly, "even knowing the risk." "And yet," Trotsky replied, "each night the darkness grows stronger." Stalin, meanwhile, was having his own moment of reflection. In his private study, he kept a small icon of St. Nicholas, not from faith, but from sentimentality. He understood that Trotsky saw him as a bureaucratic mediocrity. The Jewish intellectual believed his own mythology, his destiny as Lenin's true heir. That would be his downfall. On the fifth night, Stalin played his most vicious card. He leaked documents suggesting Trotsky had been secretly negotiating with Western capitalists. The evidence was fabricated, but brilliantly crafted. In a party built on paranoia, suspicion was more powerful than proof. Trotsky demanded a public hearing to clear his name. Stalin agreed immediately, knowing the trap was set. The hearing was a masterpiece of political theater. Stalin presented himself as the reluctant accuser, forced by duty to reveal painful truths. Each witness had been carefully prepared, each document perfectly forged. Trotsky fought brilliantly, but he was fighting shadows. How do you defeat accusations that shift like smoke? The sixth candle burned as Trotsky's remaining supporters began to distance themselves. Political survival demanded it. But in a small synagogue in the Jewish quarter, an old rabbi named Mendel watched the political drama with knowing eyes. "The light persists," he told his grandson, "even when it seems the darkness has won." The boy didn't understand, but years later he would remember those words in the gulags. Stalin's victory seemed inevitable as the seventh night arrived. The Central Committee had voted. Trotsky was expelled from the Politburo. But the Georgian wasn't finished. He wanted total destruction, not mere defeat. On the eighth and final night of Hanukkah, Stalin made his final move. Trotsky was offered a choice: accept exile to Kazakhstan or face charges of treason. Trotsky chose exile, believing he could rebuild his movement from the steppes. He never realized Stalin had already decided he would never return. As 1925 dawned, Trotsky found himself on a train heading east, watching Moscow disappear behind him. In his bag, wrapped carefully in his wife's scarf, was the small menorah. Stalin stood at his office window, master of the Soviet Union at last. He had won through patience, cunning, and an understanding that men's fears matter more than their ideals. But victory felt hollow. In destroying Trotsky, he had also destroyed something vital in the revolution itself. The dream of world revolution died with Trotsky's exile. In its place rose the nightmare of one man's absolute power. Years later, in Mexico City, Trotsky would write his memoirs. He never mentioned the Hanukkah candles or his grandmother's letter, but those who knew him said he kept a small menorah on his desk until the day Stalin's assassin found him. Stalin, for his part, never forgot the lesson of those 8 nights. Power belonged to whoever was willing to wait in darkness while others played in the light. The Jewish families who lit their Hanukkah candles during that fateful week couldn't have known they were witnessing the end of an era. By 1953, when Stalin finally died, most of them were gone too, victims of the same paranoia that had destroyed Trotsky. But in hidden corners of the Soviet Union, in whispered stories passed between generations, the memory persisted. The story of 2 men who fought for Russia's soul during 8 winter nights. One who believed in the power of brilliant flames, another who mastered the art of snuffing them out. History remembers Stalin as the victor, but perhaps the old rabbi was right. Perhaps some lights burn on, invisible but eternal, waiting for their moment to blaze again. The revolution devoured its children, as revolutions always do. But in that devouring, it revealed something profound about human nature. We are creatures of both light and shadow. We can be inspired to greatness by brilliant orators like Trotsky, but we are ruled by patient manipulators like Stalin. The tragedy isn't that Stalin won. The tragedy is that his victory was inevitable. In a system built on fear and suspicion, the paranoid will always triumph over the passionate. But here's the thing about Hanukkah. It's not really about victory in battle. It's about the miracle of light persisting when it shouldn't. Maybe that's the real lesson of this story. Maybe the true miracle isn't that Stalin defeated Trotsky, but that despite everything, the human spirit refuses to be completely extinguished. Even in the darkest moments of the Soviet experiment, even in the depths of the gulags, people found ways to keep small flames burning. They told stories. They remembered names. They passed down songs their grandparents had sung. They kept faith that somewhere, somehow, the light would return. And in the end, it did. The Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union collapsed. The candles burn openly in Moscow once again. Stalin won the battle for Russia's soul, but he couldn't kill the soul itself. That's the miracle we're still living through today. The miracle that oppression, no matter how total, cannot completely snuff out the human desire for freedom. So the next time you light a candle, remember those 8 nights in 1924. Remember 2 brilliant men who fought over the future of the world. Remember that in the darkness between victory and defeat, ordinary people kept small lights burning. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about power and resistance in new ways, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the best way to honor those who fought for truth is to keep telling their stories. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Trotsky's position? Could he have won with different tactics? The conversation starts here, but it continues with you. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.